Welcome, everybody. I want to welcome back on the show that exactly 2 years and 5 days ago today, I had a DONi Press News Agency journalist on Ukraine War Awareness channel, and she is back with us today. Her name is Christelle Néant, and she is always on the front lines, the first to report many of the ceasefire violations, has a lot of insider knowledge within the Donetsk People's Republic, and I would like to welcome her back. Christelle, it's good to have you back. So as I'm aware, you are right now not part of DONi Press Agency?
I'm still part of DONi Press Agency, but our agency is under administrative reorganization after the death of the head of the state, Alexander Zakharchenko. So I've launched my own personal project for the moment. It's Donbass Insider, which is open not only to the Donbass conflict, but to other conflicts like Syrian conflict, like Libya, and this kind of other peripheral conflicts where Russia can be involved. But Donbass Insider will continue to work after DONi will be fully relaunched. We are on the process to relaunch fully the agency. It's just taking a little bit of time.
I understand. And so I have reviewed your Donbass Insider website, and I see that you personally go to a field that has been shot up. For example, the latest report you have on Sakhanka with a ceasefire breach violation with Ukrainian army shells. One civilian was killed. All of that is your images, right?
Yeah.
Your work,
yeah.
images. Fantastic. I think you are doing a great service to the people and to the international community about giving another perspective of what's going on in Donetsk. So what has exactly been going on ever since Alexander Zakharchenko died? It seems that DONi is not the only agency that was affected. What other things were affected after Pushilin took power?
A lot of things are changing. We are seeing huge activity, huge legislative activity from the DPR parliament, the People's Council. Much more laws are passed. We see a huge activity from Pushilin to really solve the problems, which were still, how can I say, underlying when it was still Zakharchenko, because Zakharchenko was a very great head of the state, but he was not a legislator. It was a soldier. It was a guy who had really good art and was really honest and so on, but there were some legislative points on which he did perhaps some mistakes. We see also an acceleration of the integration with Russia, acceleration of the work with the integration committee Russia Donbass, which was launched 2 years ago, something like this, yeah. And more and more activity to obtain recognition of the DPR on the from the international community, from other countries. So yeah, we had elections. Pushilin was elected in November last year. We had also deputy elections at the same time. So we have new parliament. So a lot of things are going to improve. Yeah.
So Pushilin was elected, you say, by the people, and the integration with Russia. Now, I've been hearing a lot of insiders from inside Donetsk and from around the areas of eastern Ukraine. A lot of people feel betrayed by Russia. Now, I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody, of course. This is just from what I hear, that they feel that Russia isn't committing enough to Donetsk or Donbass, that Russia isn't doing enough to integrate, and some go as far as to say that Russia isn't even interested in integrating Donbass into Russia. Can you confirm or deny such things?
No, it's just that the thing is that, as Pushilin said recently in an interview, why the integration of Donbass was not done like the one of Crimea. It's mainly for legal reasons, because the status of Crimea in 2014 was the one of the autonomous republic. So they had more legitimacy to organize referendum, which can be recognized by international community from the international law point of view. And there's also a financial part. That's also why I think our integration will be a little bit slower, but I think it will be smoother. because Crimea was integrated really fastly to Russia, while Russian budget was not ready for that. The 2014 Russian budget was not prepared to assume the integration of the peninsula, was not ready to assume all the costs it would have. I mean, in terms of repairing the infrastructures, because the roads were in really, it was a pity. I mean, I had friends who went to Crimea before the integration with Russia and after, and they told me it was really completely different, and that before it was really a mess, that the roads were really in bad state. For example, all the infrastructure, it cost a lot to drag this electrical cable cables to the peninsula. Then the bridge, of course, it was really a huge project, costing a lot. And so Crimea was really a burden for the Russian economy and the Russian budget.
So speaking of the reparations, by the way, I remember that even the France 24 report that we originally came into contact with each other, they were talking about Russian reparations and how it benefits the Russian economy. However, that's not what I want to ask. I want to ask, has Russian reparations still been going on through Donetsk? Like, is Donetsk a lot more repaired today than it was 2 years ago when we talked?
Yeah. Reparations are ongoing really a lot, with the help of Russia, with the help also of foreign humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross. I've seen in Sakhanka last year, they distributed construction materials to repair the houses. They gave
do the people have access to gas, electricity, heating?
In most of the places, yes. There are still some places on the front line where, like Spartak, this village is still without, everything.
Spartak, a little village next to the Donetsk
airport. Yeah.
I will, of course, include on your screens right now the map of Spartak right now. And what I want to ask, in your personal opinion, from what you see, since you for many years now have been coming across the front lines from the Ukrainian villages being about 500 meters away from you, half a kilometer away from you. So from what you see, do you think that Donetsk, the People's Republic, is actually being repaired faster than Ukrainian government-held territories? Or is it about even side? No,
it's really faster. I was already in Sakhanka last year when there was huge shelling, and one of the shelling cut the electricity. They destroyed one electrical transformator substation, and within the day it was repaired. And from what I heard from Ukrainian side is that it's really abandoned. They really do not repair, and they let everything like this. And the echoes that I have is that, yeah, we really repair faster than them. We really try to, our repair teams are really doing their best to repair within the day.
What other insight can you tell us about Russian assistance? Can you share anything else in what terms or what categories Russia sends its assistance besides humanitarian aid? Is there anything else you can share with us?
It's mainly diplomatic. We can see also, so this committee, this integration committee, Russia Donbass, so is existing and expanding. So more and more regions from Russia are participating to this committee, which is led by a deputy from the Duma, from the Russian parliament. There is also all this diplomatic help inside the Minsk discussions, of course. Russia is more and more pushing towards OSCE to make better reports about what is happening, who is really violating the ceasefire, where are the civilian victims, and so on. I think things will move after April. Because in April, after the elections in Ukraine, Russia has already said that if it's obviously fraudulent, they will not recognize the results of the Ukrainian presidential elections. And in April this year, so it will be the official end of the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Cooperation between Russia and Ukraine. And this treaty is really important because in this treaty, it is where Russia and Ukraine recognize frontiers of each other's.
Does that mean that Minsk II will be affected as well?
I think the Minsk II agreement will be affected by the cancellation. The treaty around the management of the Azov Sea will be also affected because it's based on this friendship treaty. So as the friendship treaty will be cancelled, the current treaty about the rules around the Azov Sea will be cancelled also.
So this I actually did not expect. I did not expect this cancellation of all these treaties and ceasefires. So if Minsk II and the Azov Sea treaties are canceled, does that mean there's nothing going to be holding over a ceasefire? Both Ukraine or Donetsk will be able to attack each other freely until...
It's possible. It's also possible that it opens the way for a recognition of the DPR and LPR by Russia, because then Russia is not withhold to recognize the frontiers of Ukraine and its territorial integrity. So it can open the door to a lot of things. What is I can say funny is that Russia has simplified end of last year, has launched simplification of acquiring Russian nationality, Russian passports for people from coming from Donbass and from Ukraine. And this simplification, the process is ongoing, and normally the new procedure, simplified procedure, will be available from April. So it means that now people from Donbass will not need to get through language tests. They will not have to justify about their revenues. They will not have to justify to live in Russia for 5 years, not even to live in Russia. So they could ask the passport from Donbass. If I understood well the new rules, I wait for really the final rules published, I think, in April when everything is ready. But from what was published and what I saw, it's what would the new rules be. So it could be like in South Ossetia.
From what I understand is basically, as you said earlier, that Crimea had a lot of more autonomy. So what it sounds like to me is basically that they're going to become, Donbass, I mean, is going to become basically an autonomous region in terms of Russia, pretty much, right?
Yeah, something like that. And I think we will integrate slowly Russia so that we are not an economic burden for the budget, because a lot of Russians, they feel a little bit badly about the costs. They understand, okay, Crimea is ours, but yeah, it cost us a lot, and they are not really willing to have to endure a second burden like this if they have to integrate Donbass.
Now, let me ask about the Donbass people's mentalities or perspectives or opinions. From most people that you encounter, the average DPR civilian, do they support integration with Russia, or do they prefer to remain an independent state?
Most of them, they want integration with Russia, and it was shown in a survey which was done by a local media a few months ago. They asked if you have the possibility, would you ask for the Russian passport? And they were 89% to answer yes.
Okay.
So 89% want to be Russians.
89.
So I think
how do you come to those statistics, by the way? Are they just polls? Because there's a lot of accusations that that a lot of these statistics are, tampered with. Like, I'm just curious, how do you guys come to get that 89% statistic?
So it's polls done by phone here by one of the news agency, which is DNR Live. And they often do this kind of polls, and it's from what I see, it's okay. It's the numbers are realistic. I mean,
basically, we do that. In the United States, yeah, a lot of companies, third-party companies, also conduct polls from telephones. So yeah, I can believe that. Now, another question regarding elections: do the people of Donbass follow or keep keep themselves updated in terms of the Ukrainian elections? Do they have a specific presidential candidate of Ukraine that they want to win or that they are rooting for? Or are they completely disregarding the Ukrainian election and focusing their integration with Russia?
They are mainly focusing on their integration with Russia because the thing is that they understand that the elections in Ukraine are completely rigged, that it will be completely fraudulent, that the only opposition candidate, Yuri Boyko, has almost no chance. It will be either Zelensky or Timoshenko. So for us, it will change absolutely nothing, or just for the worst. So people here will keep an eye, of course, about what's happening in Ukraine because it impacts us. We have an escalation since the beginning of the electoral campaign in Ukraine. We see clearly an increase of shellings, and mainly shellings against civilians, against civilian infrastructures, since the beginning of the election campaigns. So we keep an eye on it, but we do not expect anything positive from it.
Right, I understand. So moving on, speaking about civilian bombings, now we cannot deny that both the DPR and Ukraine start shellings on both sides. However, as I came to conclude before, that most people are aware that it's not the Ukrainian state regular army that usually bombs them, but it is the National Guard that usually shells them, the National Guard of Ukraine, which is comprised of volunteer battalions such as Right Sector, Azov Regiment, Aidar Battalion, such and such, etc. My question is that basically between 2015 and 2017, by my count, the Donetsk People's Republic and Lugansk People's Republic in combination have lost about 8.5 villages to the Ukrainian National Guard, such as Zaitseva, such as Avdiivka.
It's not that we have lost these villages, because these villages were in the gray area where normally there should be no soldiers and no weapons. The problem is that the Ukrainian army did not respect the Minsk agreements and invaded this gray area. But it was not territory which was a part of the DPR and LPR. It was already, just over the front line. So it's just that the Ukrainian army, how can we say, took some 100 meters there and there by invading these villages where there were no soldiers from DPR or LPR.
So my question is, did in 2018 and the beginning of 2019, have you still seen chunks of 100 meters lost here, 200 meters lost there, or has the border remained relatively the same since 2017?
It remains the same because they have chunked everything they could. They pretended sometimes to have taken the one village in DPR, Petrovskoye, in the south of Donetsk, but our guys from the DPR Army Press Service went there to make a report to say, you see, it's still ours. It's not true what they are pretending on Ukrainian propaganda. So, but now they are so closed in both villages like Zaitsevo or other places. The positions of both are less than 200 meters from each other.
Yeah, and as many international medias report that it's mostly an artillery war, but it's impossible to have an artillery war from just 200 meters apart. That is.
Yeah. So in Promzone, in Promkar, which we discussed last time, between Avdiivka and Yasinovata, the positions are at something like 50 or 80 meters one from each other. So they just shoot at Kalashnikov, RPG, some grenades, and that's all. You cannot do anything more.
Going to my next question in that case, basically the casualty list on international sources, pretty much, like on Western sources especially, has not changed the civilian casualty list, how it has been to 10,000 civilians, 10,000 people died in Ukraine war since 2015. It still remains 10,000, it's not being updated.
But we continue to have victims.
Yeah, of course. That's actually where I'm getting at. In 2018 and the beginning of 2019, how many per month on average would you say on the Donetsk line civilians die and separatist soldiers? If you can give me a number of civilians and a number of separatists on average per month that die.
On average per month, we had few civilians. If I remember last year, we had something like 100 people who died or something like that. I have to recheck the numbers exactly, but last year was quite
calm. 100 people in a month? 100 people in a month?
In the year, something, yeah, in terms of civilians and soldiers, we had a little bit more, but I don't remember exactly the numbers, but last year was quite calm. We had less victims.
It sounds like 100 civilians is, as blunt and as brutal as it may sound, because that's still 100 lives lost, but that's a significantly less margin than from 2016, 2017. So that's some good news from that.
But currently, during the last month of the beginning of this year, we have really a sharp increase. We have currently no week without death, both in civilians and soldiers. So during the last weeks, we had already 6 or 7 civilians which died, and we had dozens of soldiers. So
understandable, yes. Okay, moving on, I want to move in on the economical sector. So in our last interview, we talked about nationalization of private sectors of basically factories, production facilities, and all of that. And there's still ongoing reports from Western and Ukrainian reports that the DPR still has problems, for example, filling up their supermarkets with foods, or if the food is there, then it's ridiculously priced that nobody can afford it. Can you answer the two questions? How is nationalization proceeding, and is it beneficial for Donetsk? And the second question is, how easy is it to get produce for the average person of Donetsk?
So concerning the nationalization, it has been fully done. All the industries and markets and so on have been nationalized. Since Denis Pushilin, the head of the state, he had reviewed a little bit that, because some markets and commercial centers which were taken from private people who have built it. It was not markets or commercial centers which were built by the state, even Soviet state or independent Ukraine. So he put some, legal stuff in that. So he gave back some markets and commercial centers which were built on private money.
I'm sorry to cut you off. By private, you mean the ones built within the independence of Ukraine between 1991 and 2014. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So he said it's not legal to take, stuff from people. I mean, they have given them money.
That sounds fair. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but he said all the markets and commercial centers which were built by state money from USSR or after, then it stay under the DPR state control. Concerning food, the supermarkets are absolutely full. The markets, the food markets too. You can find food for affordable prices. We had some rise in some prices, like the bread, because the harvest last year was a little bit bad because of bad weather conditions. But there are still control over prices by the state for the basic food, like bread, like potatoes, like this kind of stuff. So everything is kept under a huge control. There is control from what they call the Narodny control. So it's young people, young activists activists who are often part of the social movements, who are going in the supermarkets and checking the prices. If the prices are too high, we saw that when Zakharchenko was still alive, he went to one market where the prices were really so high that it was unbelievable. And he said they have to regularize the situation. And he asked, what justified that you have such prices? And the justifications were not, he was not satisfied
Basically,
with them.
it was a pure capitalist, like maximum profit for money pocketing, basically. And so
so we have here Respublikansky supermarkets. So we have some supermarkets which are owned by the state. We have gas stations also which are owned by the states, where the prices are the lowest possible. And so it pushes the other private companies to align to the prices of these state-owned companies. So it's keeping quite under control the situation.
All right, thank you for the insight. What I want to ask also is, since everything is being nationalized, coming from Ukrainian reports in places such as Avdiivka and other war-torn areas where people fled from Ukrainian government-controlled territories of Donbass, they fled in 2014 and returned 4 years later. They have a huge electric bill, even though their house was blown up, their homes were destroyed. They basically didn't even use electricity, but are still being charged for 4 years, which Ukrainians are really complaining about. Basically, where I'm leading to is that, what about for Donetsk people? Is there utility bills? Are they also nationalized, or do they have to pay utility bills? Is heating, gas, water, is it free for an average citizen, or do they pay a minimal amount per use?
We pay on per use. We pay communal charges, but the prices are really far under the Ukrainian prices. Because the prices here for everything have not moved since 2014. So there are huge state subventions to avoid the rise of prices. I think for electricity, the price is from 6 to 8 times lower than on the Ukrainian side. The gas is something also like this, from 6 to 8 times lower. Water is like 3 times lower, and the heating is something like 4 or 5 times lower here than in the Ukrainian side.
So you say that the average standard of living on this side, on the Donetsk People's Republic side of the border front line, is basically, in your opinion, a lot higher percentage of average living standard than on the Ukrainian side of government.
Yeah, because here we don't have the constraint from the IMF, because the IMF pushed Ukraine to rise their communal charges for the money from the IMF. It's part of the deal, and so the price really rose. For the gas, I think it's something like 10 times since 2014. So the gas price was multiplied by 10 times in Ukraine. We didn't have these constraints, so of course the prices remain the same.
Well, right, because Donetsk does get its gas from Russia directly instead of how Ukraine actually, I've heard a report where Ukraine now has to pay 17 times more for gas, and it's, in the end, it's still Russian gas because it just goes through the South Stream to Turkey, then to Britain, then to the Netherlands, and then the Netherlands...
no, it's even simpler. It gets through Ukraine, it goes to the frontier with the European Union, so to Slovakia, and then it comes back. It's just that. It's the same gas which is going through the Ukrainian tubes, but it's just that they pay something like $100 more per 1,000 million cubic meters for just the fact that they pretend they buy it to Europe instead of buying it to Russia, but it's still the Russian gas.
Yeah, it's still just basically with a label, with a different label now.
Yeah, exactly.
So not energy independent from
absolutely not, and it's unfair for the citizens of Ukraine, because they pay this extra price for nothing. It's just for propaganda to pretend that they don't buy Russian gas. So here we have to pay utility bills, but some people are exempted from it. So people who are really on the front line, who are really in torn areas and so on, they are exempted. There was a bill also done by Pushilin to exempt families from dead soldiers, from dead DPR soldiers, so to exempt them from criminal charges also. So we have not this kind of burden from criminal charges, and you see it in a quite simple number. Here in DPR, something like 70% of people pay their bills without problem. In Ukraine, you have the same percentage of people who don't pay all their bills.
Right. And like I said, I absolutely understand why, because if they pile up like that. But so out of also curiosity, if a person, since I see that the Donetsk People's Republic is trying to follow more of like a Brezhnev era developed socialism type of model, if a person gets sick, for example, and they need to see a doctor, would the doctor visit be free? Do they have to, well, I see that Donetsk is adopting more of a developed socialism model, which was like common in the Brezhnev era of the USSR. So basically, out of my curiosity, if a person gets sick and they need to visit a doctor, will a checkup and a blood test, will it be free also, minimal prices, or is it like here in the US where the $1 doctor's lab coat has to pay $200 for it through insurances? How is healthcare basically like? And a few like short summary, how is healthcare in the DPR?
So doctor consultation is for free. I had tested it myself. If you had to do like X-ray in hospital or scanner, things like that, it's free also. The only thing you pay is medicaments, or if you need like system like to maintain your arm or your leg or this kind of thing, you have to pay. But most of the basic stuff, even basic operations, are free. I had a friend who had to be operated of appendicit, and it was for free. She paid nothing. She was at hospital.
To get the appendix out surgery, surgery was completely free?
Completely free. She stayed in hospital. It was free. The only thing she paid, it was the medicaments, so the painkillers.
And is it professionally done too? She didn't have any adverse side effects? Because here it's about $7,000 in New York City for this type of operation. You know, you'd think something so simple as to remove an appendix, $7,000 for it, plus also, you know, about $200 for the medications afterwards.
No, here it's not this price, and we have access to a lot of Russian medicaments which are really effective and for lower price. I see, for example, here if you see the price of ibuprofen, so which is simple, you know, painkiller and anti-inflammation medicaments. It's around like 300-400 rubles for one package. But if you buy the Russian equivalent, which is the Ketanov, you pay just 25 rubles for the blister. So
to my viewers, ibuprofen is basically Motrin, and Ketanov is the Russian version of ibuprofen, basically. So, wow, 25 rubles. And are you still using your own Donetsk currency rubles, or is it already the Russian ruble?
It's a Russian ruble since a long time. So that's why we are dependent on the monetary policy from Russia, of course.
Do you think, sorry to cut you off, do you think that people will be, if, for example, integration into Russia will be successful, do you think that people will fear losing the free surgeries, free doctor visits, and other free benefits that they are?
No, because in Russia also you have free medical service. Often it's considered as less quality than the paid one, but I know that it exists in Russia too. You can go to hospital and have consultation for free and a lot of treatments for free. But it can be maintained. You know, Russia is a federation with a lot of autonomous republics. Crimea is one of the case, but it's not the only one. And so each republic
Chechnya
can,
as well, yes.
yeah. So we can imagine that we can maintain some kind of perhaps more social policy than the other Russian entities. It's possible.
And also, since we're speaking about the average average type of organizations, how's the police, like the average police, militia in Donetsk? Are they corrupt? Are they fair? Do they try to get bribes like it was very common in the 1990s of Russia, early 2000s of Russia, or do they maintain professionalism like they did in the 70s, 80s USSR?
No, they are really professional. It's policia. It's really not militia. It's really policia, like in Russia now. They are really professional. I've never had a case where a policeman asked me a bribe. They are really nice, I have to admit, because even when you do some on the road and so on, they are not too harsh. The first time they tell you okay, but not the second time okay, and so no, they're really nice, really professional, and nothing to say against them. Really great. We have even a school to train them to have police cadet and so on.
So it really sounds like the people themselves have chose for socialism and are making it seem making their dreams seem to realize. Now, just to reiterate, this is what the people of Donetsk want, right? For majority,
yeah.
You talk to many individuals in Donetsk, they support what's going on, like people on the streets, right? So, all right, it's about time to close this interview up. Is there anything that you feel that I did not ask that you want to include to my viewers?
From my point of view, we have covered everything. I really have to say that since the change of heads of the state in DPR and LPR, the situation is really improving. The cooperations between the two republics also. And yeah, the integration with Russia is really accelerating. We are even working with South Ossetia to to break the economic blockade that we have from Ukraine, to have the possibility to have international money transfer through South Ossetian Bank, who will act like clearance room for our central banks to...
Now, you said about a blockade. Actually, that reminds me, during the right sector and nationalist forces always had a blockade since 2014, and even up to the latest report in 2017, where they clashed with the Ukrainian state police telling them to lift the blockade, right sector denying it and still keeping their blockade against Donbass. Is there still a blockade by nationalist units?
The blockade is still there because after some times Poroshenko even legalized this non-official blockade and transformed it into an official blockade from Ukraine. That's partly why also the big ports of Mariupol and Berdyansk are now dying, because they have no more products from the DPR and LPR to export. So
basically the blockades hurts the own Ukrainian economy, basically.
Of course. Even Poroshenko had to admit that since the secession of DPR and LPR, Ukraine had lost 15% of its GDP and 25% of its industry.
That is significant numbers. Anyways, thank you very much for joining again and answering a lot of these follow-up questions, giving us a second perspective into Donetsk through your eyes and your journalism. As you know, DPR only most viewers know about, from the Western perspective. So you open up that second perspective. If there are going to be any questions that my viewers will ask towards you, I will leave your Donbass Insider link in my description, and I will also leave contact information of anything, if you do allow it, for any questions that could be answered, or they can ask questions to me. I'll just relay it to you and give them the answer that you give me. So thank you very much for joining. And to the viewer, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it or the information you received, please consider giving it a thumbs up or subscribing to this channel. We are preparing to release a lot of new content from both perspectives on the Donbass war very soon. Please consider following us on these social media platforms, including joining our Discord server. And if you like the work that I do, please consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. It would really help the channel a lot to progress even further. Global event coverage. Thank you all, and I'll see you in the next one.